Hello everyone, mattphilleo here in the studio. Here's a question for you. How do you build up shading and depth with the acrylic glazing technique? And how do you specifically choose what colors to use in shadow areas, midtones, and highlights? That's the question one of my students had. Her name is Holly, and she's working on a portrait of her brother and was kind of confused in regards to the shading process. She's just beginning in her portraits, doing a fantastic job on her sketch and getting things established there, but had a few questions in regards to building up colors and getting the right optical mix using the glazing technique, and then knowing where to exactly to put those shadows. So I figured the best thing to do is to hop on a video call with her and set up a little meeting where I demonstrated exactly a game plan for her and where to put those shadows, what colors to use, and how to proceed in her painting. So that's what I'm going to show you today, and we'll take a look at the video side by side with her reference photo and then her actual portrait, and just kind of show you the process of how this would be done. And hopefully this is something that'll be beneficial to you. As you're watching, you can see where you should go as you proceed in your portrait. So let's switch over to the video here with Holly and show you what's going on.
All right, so what I'm going to do is pull up the screen mode. And let me open up Photoshop. And you can see your images right here. Can you see them?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I decided to open this up in Photoshop so that we can kind of do some painting in a sense, digital painting. I think that'll just at least show you kind of what you're looking for, some of the answers to your questions. And why don't you go ahead if you can and just give me your questions again.
Okay.
On this particular painting and how you want to resolve it.
Okay. So I started working on the shadow areas on his face, and they darkened up pretty quickly. And I thought, oh, I better stop because it looks really, really dark.
Uh-huh.
But it's only one layer, so surely I'm not supposed to stop and move to midtones yet. But I don't know. Especially around his eyes. It just looks weird, and I didn't know what to do next. And I guess my question is, how many layers am I supposed to do of something before I move on to the next thing?
Right. So that is a good question. Well, I'm going to help you with this step by step here for the next 15 minutes or so, and hopefully get you onto a path where you feel confident in continuing in the painting. So the first thing would be, the way I would approach this painting. Let me just show you. I'm going to pull up a brush tool here. This is a little different, obviously, than what I normally do. I don't do digital paintings, but I do edit some of my photos on Photoshop, especially when I'm doing pictures that have many photos put together. But let's say, we were painting and we were using something like, raw umber dark or raw umber, which would be probably this kind of a color, maybe a little darker. I'm going to see if I can get it about to what raw umber dark would look like. And we'll take a brush size that would kind of fill in the hair. Now this is going to look different. It's going to be a little, it's not going to look like a brush. I mean, I don't know how to make it do that. But just to give you the idea, if I was going to continue in this painting, one of the things I would do is start to fill in the color on his hair. Now I can see some of the shadows in from your sketch. I'm going to ask you, did you go over those shadows again with paintbrush?
Yes.
Okay, so some of these shadows are enhanced over and above the sketch.
Yeah, all of them are. I did all the shadows.
Okay, okay. So it's very faint. I don't think you're guilty of going too dark at all.
Okay.
What you would want to do is you'd want to start, okay, that's way too dark. Undo that. I'm going to reduce the opacity down, so that would actually mimic having this mixed with a lot of matte medium and making it more transparent. But you would actually start to fill in this solid mass of hair, okay, just like what you see going on here. And that would, you know, probably be one level right there. You don't want to overdo it, but what you want to do is kind of see you have like a general value, and then you have what I call local values. And if you go through the shading course I have, Shade with Acrylic Like a Master,
Yes.
I go over some of that terminology. Some of it's art terminology from other artists and art theory. Some of it's stuff I've just made up myself just to be able to explain it to students. But you have local values, which would be these tiny little areas. Like if you were just filling in maybe, you know, a nuance right here within his jacket, a wrinkle. But then the general value would be like the jacket as the whole, okay, the overall darkness of the whole thing. And then you have what's called the key within the painting, and that's actually all of the values together in the painting, how they relate to each other. So you have kind of three different levels. But this here would be kind of like a general value within his hair. So you darken this overall value because you're trying to see the common value within his hair throughout. And you see if I can zoom in on this a little bit.
Okay, so you would paint that over the shadow part as well?
Yeah, yeah, so everything overlaps.
Okay.
So if you look at this, you're seeing like this particular color right here, and you're going to see it also represented over here and here. I mean, it's very similar.
Yeah.
You know, you can see I'm using the eyedropper tool, and all of them are kind of in the same family. But then within those areas, you also have some of these smaller values, and then these are kind of similar. So if I were to switch brush tools here, it's a little different than my program on Zoom. Let's switch colors. And let's see if this can actually be seen on the screen. Let's see, I got to add a new layer. Okay, a little trickier this way. Got to go on top of that. Okay, so can you see these markings here?
Yeah.
All right. So you'd have then these smaller values like this. These would be kind of the local values, that's what I call them. And they would just be like within these shadowed areas, all right? Like that. And you try to find the common denominator between all those different shadows and simplify it down to just some basic shapes. I mean, you do want to retain, you know, the detail within your sketch. You don't want to lose that, but you want to simplify it and just start blocking in these initial values. And it's going to be kind of a push and a pull then between blocking in these smaller values and then going over the whole hair with these lighter values that cover the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna clear that off.
So those red portions that you just highlighted, those shapes that you just pulled out, the local values, those are the parts that I've been painting with the dark color.
Pardon me, say that again?
Those red parts that you just outlined as the local value.
Yep.
Those are the parts that I have been painting with the shadow, with the darkest shadow color that you recommended.
Right.
So that's correct.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay.
Yep, it's just that you'll want to go over the other areas with the general values.
Right. Okay.
So if we're, you know, talking about his jacket, for example, let's show you that. Let's just actually pull this color here with the eyedropper tool. And it's kind of a blue that's almost, I don't know if this photo is accurate the way I'm seeing it on my screen, but it almost has a purplish indigo look to it.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Okay, so ultramarine blue will not get you that look.
Okay.
You're going to have to add a little bit of alizarin crimson. And I mean, if you even had dioxazine purple, you could add that to it as well. Okay. But yeah, you're not going to achieve that with ultramarine blue. But you can start with ultramarine blue, and you can add a layer of alizarin crimson to it, or a layer of alizarin crimson mixed with a little blue so it's not too vivid. And so that's the thing with the glazing technique. I mean, it can take probably 5, 10 or more layers to get the color you're looking for. But when you keep adding those glazes, it's going to add a lot of depth to it that you wouldn't get with opaque. All right, so let's show you this. I'm going to increase the brush size. And we'll just imagine we have, like, I don't know, a 1-inch brush, flat brush going on this. And we'll reduce the opacity down to about 15%. And so you would literally start filling this whole thing in. I would even paint over those buttons, because that's just a pain to try to paint around those little buttons. I'd paint over the whole thing, and then later I'd take opaque paint and actually pop them out again. Okay, so I overlap there, so you can see it's, yeah. This, I can't smooth it out with Photoshop, but yeah. If this was a brush, I could. So you would fill this whole thing in, and that would be one layer right there. And that's about kind of the opacity you're looking for. Just faint, you know, just start filling in that color. And then after that's done, then you're going to go back, you know, while this is drying. You could take this same color, because you have it on your brush, start filling in the background and get another layer on that. Okay, you're not going to want to paint over the hair like I did, but just fill that in. So you can actually fill in that whole area. In fact, I mean, if you wanted to, you wouldn't even have to go up to the edges of his coat. You could just take that same blue and you could fill in this whole area, just leaving his head and the white of his shirt alone. Oh, okay. Okay, just make it very simple. And then after that's drying, you can go back in and do another layer on his hair. You could start blocking in some of the coloring on his beard. Let me shrink down the brush tool here. So because his beard is very dark, raw umber dark is not going to be dark enough to get that value. It's going to start looking too intense. It's going to have too much of an intense brown chroma to it. And to tone that down, because just like when you're in a dark room, colors get very hard to see. Like you're like, you know, you're in your bedroom and it's kind of dim and it's like, is that a red shirt or is that a blue? I can't tell, you know. But as soon as you turn on the light, you can see the differences in the color. So same thing with this. When the shadows get very dark, the intensity of the colors goes way down. So to get that effect, you're going to have to add a little bit of blue to these darkest values. And that would be like just here within the beard, maybe just here within this part of his hair, just the darkest values. So you're going to add the blue to that as well.
Hey, just want to jump in here again and kind of break up the video and mention realisticacrylic.com, which is a place where you can go to get more tutorials to help you in your portrait painting. If you struggle with acrylic portrait painting, or you're just starting out and you'd like some helpful advice on where to go, like in setting up your sketch and how to use colors and mix for skin tones, build up shading and depth and details and all those great things that make for a fantastic portrait, go to realisticacrylic.com, and that's a website dedicated to helping acrylic portrait artists create a portrait they can be proud of. So go ahead and hop on to realisticacrylic.com after you're done watching this video. Sign up for my email tips. I send some art tips once a week, and that'll give you something that you can use to improve your portraits right away. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know about that, and then we're going to get back to the video here with Holly. All right.
Yeah, but what you want to do is you want to add some titanium white to that, mixed with the glaze. You know, so you're gonna thin it out with some medium. So just to show you that, how that might look, we can pull up a brush, and let's see, we'll make it a little bigger than that. Yeah, something like that. And you know, you maybe want to use a 1/2 inch brush, you know, depending on the size of the picture. And you would just go over like this, taking that titanium white. Now this is opaque, so it's kind of a little different than glazing with something that's darker. But you need to tone down those pencil lines. They're just too dark. And they're also too brown, because if you look here, those colors are more on the grayish side. So taking that white will do that very, very well. So you could hit that with one layer, come back later on while you're working on something else, waiting for it to dry, hit it with another layer. Don't do so much that you can't see your details anymore. Probably something just about like that would be good. And not only will you soften some of those pencil lines, but you're also going to restore the whiteness that needs to be there to really give you good contrast in your picture. So then after that's done, you know, while you'll be working on other layers and you'll come back to this, then you could go back with, you know, maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue. And if you want to make it simple, you don't have to mix black always from blue and brown. I mean, I just suggest that because it gives the black a little more character. It's not a crime to use ivory black out of the tube. I would suggest to tweak the color a little bit, shift it a little bit with some blue or brown. Kind of look and pay attention to the reference photo and see, is this gray, is it more on the brownish side, or is it more on the bluish side? Or is it warmer, or is it cooler? And then as you discern that, then you can go ahead and maybe add a little bit of blue to that black, or a little bit of brown. And you would start then to fill in those areas on top of your lines.
Okay.
All right, and you're going to start getting the shadows back in there again. Now for the shadows on his coat, you know, assuming other things have dried, this layer has dried, then you could go in with another layer. And let's see if I can pull that up a little smaller. Now you're going to take, now you could take a raw umber dark. You could use black as well. Like I say, it's not a crime to use black if you prefer that. I just try to encourage students to not just use straight black, just because it's kind of a lifeless color on its own. But what you do is you take brown or black and you start filling in these shadows here. And just to keep things simple, at least initially, I would suggest using brown so you can kind of get a sense for the optical mix between the raw umber dark and ultramarine blue. And by the way, Holly, did you say you purchased some paints from Nova Color?
Yeah.
So you have raw umber dark then, don't you? Okay. Yeah, apparently nobody else carries that color.
Oh.
I mean, no other brand. So I have students that use Liquitex or Golden, and they say, I can't get raw umber dark. And, you know, you can mix it, but I love that pigment. It's really nice.
I'm so happy with this paint.
Yeah, isn't Nova Color good paint?
Oh, I love it. So
And it's such a good price, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd go like this, Holly. You'd fill in all these little details, these shadows, with raw umber dark, and or ivory black, but I'm going to recommend raw umber dark, at least initially. So you'd fill in this shadow here, everything that you see in his coat that you look at and you say, is that value, like, is it really close to being black? And you can compare it to what you see in the background. And then you darken that. Now here, this whole section here, like all the way, I don't know, maybe like here, it does kind of break up and there's some gradation and shading. But like this whole area really should be filled in too. Okay, because that whole section, from what I can see, is very, very dark. Now, granted, it gets just a tiny bit darker by his armpits, but it's not much darker. So you want to start blocking in everything very simply at first.
His other arm is really dark too.
Yep, you're exactly right. Yep, this whole side too needs to be all filled in. Now, we would use a bigger brush than that to fill it in, but you get the idea. And even down here, it's kind of dark and it fades out a little bit. You know, like this could be dark. And so initially you could do it all as one layer, but then if you want to darken certain areas more, rather than thinking about mixing a darker color on your palette, just add another layer. So just add another layer of the same, because when we do that, the two on top of each other makes the whole thing darker.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting it. I'm starting to get it.
Is it kind of making sense now?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a different way of painting, and it really just, it's a whole different paradigm than what you're used to painting in. Yeah. And when this fellow, this university instructor taught me this over 20 years ago during a 1-week summer art class in high school, I mean, it was like, wow, I mean, it was a whole week, so it really was able to sink in. Yeah. Because we were painting every day. But I just realized, wow, I can do a detailed sketch and not lose the detail of my sketch. Yeah. And just slowly develop the whole painting and really give it a luminosity and a depth. So for me, it just opened up a whole new world for me. And I think other people have discovered that too, but it takes some time to get used to it. So that's the concept, Holly. Does that all make sense? Do you have any other questions on this?
Just one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Look at the streakiness of my background. I don't know. Is it gonna be like that until the end?
Well, the question is, first of all, what size brush did you use for that?
I think it was a 1-inch brush.
Okay, yep, that's what I use. As far as the brushing technique, that takes a little bit of getting used to with the glazing technique. Because when you paint opaquely, you really don't see a lot of the brushwork, you know, unless you have some mix in your color. If the color is all the same, you're not going to see any variation. But with the glazing technique, you can see a ton of variation, and it's a blessing and a curse. Because it does give the painting a lot more depth. Rather than just having a flat background, you see a lot of different little nuances that really look nice for a portrait painting. But if you don't control those nuances and it gets blotchy in certain areas, then it, you know, doesn't look quite as nice as you'd like. Yeah. So with this, kind of the trick is to, let's see if I can show you here. First of all, are you wanting to make the background very dark, like what's in the photo?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you're going to be fine. It's so dark, it's going to pull together eventually. But you're going to go back with blue and you're going to go in with brown. So you're going to hit it with a layer of ultramarine blue. Then you're going to hit it with raw umber dark. And then maybe alizarin crimson. And between those colors, it's gonna all come together. You could even add a little bit of phthalo blue to it, but that's such a pungent, strong color, you might want to avoid it. I think just those 3 colors will really do it.
When you say that, do you mean separate layers of those 3 colors, or those 3 colors mixed into one layer?
You can do both.
Okay.
You can do both. I mean, you can mix them on your palette. I wouldn't always try to have the same color each time, because if you want to have a little visual interest, it's nice to have some areas that might be a little browner and some that are a little bluer. I wouldn't try to intentionally make that happen. It'll just naturally happen. But I would go with a layer that, you know, and you really could just take raw umber dark and just use it as it is. The only thing is you have to make sure that you vary up your layers and not just keep adding raw umber dark, raw umber dark, raw umber dark. You have to look at it and observe the color after you paint it and say, does it look too brown? If it looks too brown, then I should add another layer of blue. Or you know, on the opposite side, you say, is it looking too blue? Well, then I should add another layer of brown. Because those two colors kind of compensate for each other. But if you want to make it simple, you can mix the two together and just kind of come up with a grayish color, and you can just keep putting it down. And then here's the thing, after you get more layers, you can get thicker mixes of glazes, meaning you can use more paint in your mixture and less medium. Because if you keep going with that same light mixture that you started out with, you're going to be painting forever, and you're just going to be like, man, this painting is taking too long.
Okay.
So don't do that. Just start off very faint in all of your glazes, but as you get more layers on there, it's maybe halfway done, then you can add some more paint and start getting more opaque. But yeah, eventually that streakiness it's going to go away. Another thing you can do to help with that is to vary the brush strokes. So you can go like horizontally on one layer and then go more vertically in another layer. Okay. And you always want to keep a wet edge. So like, I'm going to just show you by making this more opaque. You would start like right in a corner. And actually, I'm going to clear that off. Generally it works better to start down here and work your way up. So you'd always keep a wet edge, and you're going to like scrub this into the surface of the canvas. Like really kind of scrub it in with that brush and get it in the texture and the weave of the canvas. Then you're going to kind of do some diagonal strokes. Then you're going to do some vertical strokes and smooth it out. And after you have that section done, you move on and you overlap just a little bit. And you move on to another little section that you can smooth out. And if you keep doing it like that, it's going to end up looking a lot smoother. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because I mean, as far as the background goes, I kind of like the idea of having texture, and I don't mind that texture in there, but I didn't want whatever I was doing to happen on his face. You know. Right.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. So when you get into the excuse me, the glazes for his face, you're going to have to be way more gentle with that. You're going to be using a smaller brush, flat edge brush, like a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. And you're going to be adding in some of these kind of more reddish tones. That's obviously too dark. So it's going to be more like 20% opacity. And you're going to start blocking in some of those major values. Like you're going to start darkening under his eyes, like that, because you want to see the overall value structure. And overall, it's darker under his eyes. We have a light source coming from above. You know, the eyebrow ridge and the shape of his skull gives that shadow underneath. There's going to be a shadow here under his nose. You do want to pay attention to some of the differences in color on his face. So for example, as we zoom in, you can see that these colors are more reddish, yeah, like by his nose. by his ears, by his lips. Now notice like this color swatch here on the side, how close those are together. I mean, it's basically staying in the same area there as far as redness. But if we go and pull up like this underneath his lip, look how much that changes. Now it's a little more on the greenish side. Now don't use green. That would look way, way too green. Use like raw umber dark and raw sienna. And that's what you're going to use to kind of get these cooler tones. But you're going to use like alizarin crimson, burnt sienna, raw sienna to get these warmer tones. And you want to go very, very faint. Eventually you're going to want to add a little bit of white to your layers. And that white's going to cool down some of those colors a little bit. But it's also going to smooth the roughness of the glazes out as well. And if you follow my course, you know, I show you exactly how to do that. But yeah, so that's how you're going to want to approach the face.
When you said if you follow my course, should I be following the one where you're painting your wife or the shadow like a master?
I'm going to say follow the one where I'm painting my wife, Paint Your First Amazing Acrylic Portrait. Go through that one first because that kind of shows the whole step-by-step process. After you have that done, then I recommend to go through Shade with Acrylic Like a Master. Because that'll take the skills you learned in the first course and just refine them a little bit more. So that would be the thing to do. Yeah, so one last thing, you're going to want to get differentiation right away between the white of his shirt and the color of his neck. So when you're doing those general values and you're blocking things in, you're going to want to fill this in too right away. And that'll really, really help. It'll make an immediate improvement and just bring the painting along.
It looks like I haven't got that dark area of his beard big enough.
Yeah, you have a ways to go, and you've been approaching this very, very light, which I think is great because some of the artists I've worked with, you know, it takes a while to get that knack of going very faintly, and some of them just paint opaque right away, and you can't do that within this technique. You start off very faint. It's just like a Polaroid photograph, if you remember those from years ago. And you take that Polaroid out and it just slowly starts to develop, and all of a sudden it's like, there it is, there's the picture, you know. So it's exactly what we do with this technique.
All right, pretty cool.
So yeah, this is the first time I've ever done something like this where I took somebody's portrait and kind of broke down the process of actually how to paint it. So I think this will be really helpful for other students too.
Very helpful.
Yeah, so I'm excited to see what you do with this. I think it's going to turn out awesome. Your sketch is really well done. And how long have you been painting for?
I just started a couple months ago.
That's amazing. Really, I mean, super amazing that you're able to do this kind of work just in a few months.
Thank you.
So yeah, well, I'm excited for you, Holly. I'm going to let you go here. We're at the top of the hour, so let me know if you have any other questions, and I will be more than happy to help.
Okay, I'm just so thankful for all your help, and you took extra time, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, let me finish here with a blessing on this painting, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, and we'll get going here. Father, thank you so much for the ability you give artists to paint, and I'm just amazed, Lord, the talent you've given Holly. In just a few months' time, she's able to make portraits that look realistic. And just thank you for that talent, Lord. And I ask you bless this painting. I know it's really important to her to do this well, so she can give that as a gift, and it would bless her brother and other people that see it. So I ask you to help her to get all the colors, the values, the shading, the detail, all those things to work together and just to make an amazing portrait that she would be proud of and would be a blessing to many people. We ask that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, Holly, have a fantastic rest of your birthday.
I will. Thank you.
Okay. And we will keep in touch.
Okay. Talk to you later.
All right. God bless. Bye.
All right, well, I hope this video here has been helpful to you in showing you some tips, excuse me, and how you can proceed in getting your portrait set up after you have the sketch, and how to build up color and depth and what colors to use for shadows and midtones and that kind of thing. But if you like this video, be sure to subscribe here on my YouTube channel. Give this video a thumbs up, and that will let me know that this is something useful for you, and I can keep making more videos like this, and share it with a friend. But anyway, just want to say God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon.